Yeah.
And while we're talking about the dungeon, let's launch into our discussion on exploits. Welcome to Exploits Corner. The dungeon's final checkpoint has, it was patched yesterday, I believe, but people were loading into just literally the moment where you enter the dungeon, you enter the dungeon's final room, you see the emissary of the nine's giant blue face, and then a chest pops up, and you get your pinnacle and your inventory, and some loot drops in on your character. Yeah, people were farming the crap out of that for a while and getting really good rolls on one piece of gear over and over again.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you're not really getting much of a variety of it. I think it certainly makes sense. That was seeing that exploit done is really a weird way to checkpoint the dungeon. I've never really seen them do anything like that. Generally, as soon as the boss drops is when your encounter happens. But then again, going back to, I remember the first week of the Taken King when everybody was farming. There was a mission that you can do. It was kind of like, it was like a story mission, I think, but it was a precursor to a lost sector. Really, you can kill yourself with a rocket as you finished off this one captain boss, and as you would kill yourself, he had a high chance of dropping an exotic, so you would die. It was a darkness zone, so you'd wipe and you just keep fighting that boss over and over again, killing yourself with a rocket. So the loot would drop as the boss's health ticks to 0, but you would also die, and that would take precedent over it. So you would just go back in, and there's just piles of exotic engrams there in the room. Because you could. That's when the reason for that is because you could prop that was like the coins of the 9 or whatever they were to increase the chances of bosses.
Oh yeah,
there's
kind of
always
missed that.
like fun like. There's always been some weird like shenanigans with with like loot and things too. I feel similarly about our next topic on this too is just exploits, AFK farming.
Yeah. Before we move on, though, I think what's interesting is so Fallout dropped a video today using the same method. So like this sort of checkpoint passing, because you could pass this checkpoint on to another player, really wasn't used before this exploit. Like
different.
Yeah, leaving the party as you load in, like that's new. And there's like you can tell that it's not really something you can patch out because they just had to disable that checkpoint. Like they have to reapproach the problem. So Fallout dropped a video where you can very easily farm the 2 chests in Last Wish with a bunch of different characters, just passing the checkpoint between characters and just skipping the wish wall, except for like using it once or maybe twice to get those wishes. It's also like it's really hard on hunters to grab one of those chests because they patched sword, the Worldline 0 exotic sword jump. So this makes it easier for you to grab that second chest for a third time under your third character, which is super interesting. But it has contributed to a larger discussion on exploits that has taken place, especially in our clan, about AFK forge farming and using these exploits in general.
I'm going to pose the question to you first. How do you feel about exploits at large in Destiny, and how do they affect your gameplay?
Okay, so in Destiny specifically, for gearing, I am a guy who has literally sat in the loot cave for hours. Like working in esports has afforded me a very specific advantage in that I've always had access to gaming consoles while I'm at work. Working from home, that's now not very different. But I remember back in the days of D1 in the loot cave, I'd bring in my own controllers. I didn't want to mess up the controllers at work. I'd go in our studio when we weren't using the shows, boot up the PlayStation or the Xbox, sit in the Cosmodrome, just rubber band the sticks together and put my controller so that the trigger was always pulled, so I wasn't AFKing in front of the loot cave, and I would come back and there's all the stuff. So that's been in Destiny from the jump.
Yep.
And it's part of the culture. Like finding these exploits is part of the culture. It's part of the cat and mouse game between the community and the developer, and I love it. AFK Forge farming itself it goes way back. There's a huge history of farming up materials. You know, when Shadowkeep dropped, that's what we were doing. Like we were just loading forges and dying to get legendary shards so that we had all these materials to infuse stuff up because we weren't close to like 1,000 or whatever the light level was then. Yeah. Now it's way more egregious because it's not just AFKing and getting materials. It's AFK and getting something that leads directly to a powerful drop and eliminating the entire light level process of the season. And I understand that that's why people are really upset about it. However, if you've played the game like at all, the way you level up through the seasons has not changed. You're consistently doing the same things. It's like, have I done my weekly Crucible? Have I done my weekly Strikes? Have I done my weekly Gambit? Flashpoint? All the things. Just go down the list until you hit the soft cap or the hard cap with Powerfuls and Pinnacles. At this point, almost everyone in the game's user base has demonstrated that they can do that. I'm not upset if they skip that at all because it doesn't have anything to do with like how good you are at the game. It literally is just like how much time you've sunk into it.
Yep. My thought on the matter is if there's an ATM that's broken and it's shooting money out, it's making money rain, that doesn't mean you stop going to work, right? Right. That doesn't. Like if you're just like, cool, I'm going to put this money back in. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to do whatever. My thought process on the whole farming thing is as long as you're not actually hurting another player by what you're doing, then take the... And Bungie has even said it too. They're like, if our mistake is your gain, just do it. We're going to patch it at a certain point. Go and do it. If anything, for me, farming, I hit level 20, which was the soft cap in D1. I hit level 20 the first time. I was running a story in the Cosmodrome. I didn't know what was going on. I walked out. I came through the part, and there was a bunch of people standing on the rocks shooting into the loot cave. I discovered the loot cave organically through the game. People were messaging me going, hey, don't go past that rock. Stand back here. And then I was watching as we all shot acolytes in this cave. And
4 hours.
Loot came out, and I was just like, this is great. It's great. It's stupid.
It's free real estate.
Free real estate, dude. For me, that only makes me play the game more because I'm just like, well, there's an exploit. Let me exploit it. Let me get my extra loot, and then I'll go and do all the other stuff that I was planning to do. In terms of the leveling, here is the hard part about the way that Destiny's level system works, and this is, I know we're getting close to our time, and this is worthy of its own podcast. Mm-hmm. Number-based levels tied to RNG is never a good system. We've dealt with it in Destiny for years because it works. It's fine. We know our way around it. We know how to get what we want out of it. It goes back to the ethics. I remember seeing arguments on forums where whether it's ethical or not to have multiple characters of the same class so that you can just boop, port the gear over, jump wear that armor, then do all of your next levels of raids, nightfalls, whatever, get a new set, have your third of the same class that you like playing. Here, wear this even higher leveled set, and now you're going to go through this, and now you're going to raid on that character. And then you're going to go through and raid on all three characters because the raid loot that you get on that furthest out character, now it's going to trickle back to your other characters. You're going to do the same thing. It's the same level of exploiting, which honestly, if anything, has basically said to Bungie, hey, this leveling system's kind of busted and kind of tedious and kind of like not necessarily the fun part of the game. When you get a level that like you hit like the threshold, it's not fun. It's just a relief that you're like, now I get to play the game. Now I get to take it easy, do the activities that I want. I'm ready to raid. Everything's good. And even like this, there's proof because I've gone through it from clanmates to randos on LFG. Just having a light level does not mean you're going to perform well in a raid or in a game.
Or activity. Having gear.
Doesn't
remember back in the day, must have Gallarhorn and Icebreaker.
Gallarhorn must have 700 credit score. Like I remember like all that stuff. Like it was just like a way to lock people out. That's never what it's been about. I think that the game still deserves an XP system because it would better benefit. Like the problem that I have with this is that even if you take away any of the exploits, you can have two players that are spending the exact same amount of hours playing Destiny that will come out with it based on their knowledge of how to essentially exploit the leveling system. They'll come out with it of two different levels of light of their power
Right.
if they know how to like game the system. I don't have an issue with any of this at all. I don't think it takes away any of the credibility. I don't think it takes away any of the work that anyone has done if they leveled the quote unquote legit way. Um, at the end of the day, for me personally, it makes me play more because I'll just spend the time that I would have gotten tired out with doing Gambit or Strikes. I'll spend that time in the Crucible, a mode that I enjoy, or I'll do more raids each week, or I've run way more dungeons, you know,
Yeah.
the different dungeons. So I ultimately like it's better to let the player have fun doing what they want to do as opposed to forcing them to run the gamut of you need to do gambit, but you need to not do the pinnacle gambit. You need to do the bounties first and then the powerful and then the pinnacle. And that's the optimal order that you want to do it. But you also want to stop playing gambit. So you don't want to load up too much on gambit because you don't want to finish this over that because you want to go do strikes. It just it's a system that we're used to, but it's not a good system in any way. I
Yeah.
think we're just it's like that door in your house that you're like, this thing doesn't lock, but if you kind of jimmy it this way and you can go like you can get in through the door and it works, or you can prop this window up this way. It's janky. It's not good. It's just we're used to it.
I
That's really
think
it.
if I'm looking at like experiences that I've had with other MMOs and like also sort of how they've tried to change this with the artifact and having functionality tied to like mods in there versus like functionality and like power coming from just your light level. One thing that could sort of help with this is like no one gives a shit about gear level past a certain point. Yes, it's sort of a necessity as an MMO. Like you see it in WoW as well. There's always gear squishes. There's always like a sense of just base. Like I need to get like more. I need to get stronger. And that's split up amongst an EXP gain in some MMOs as well as a gear grind. That's fine. However, attached to that gear grind are stats, and stats in our game in Destiny, like they affect your just the respawn of your abilities. But if we had things like set bonuses that like imagine if you had and they experimented with this in Gambit Prime and the set bonuses for Gambit, but if you do that in PvE where you're just like, all right, if I have both of like the Dreaming City pieces, if I have two of those, that's gonna give me overload on my melee or something like that, or like add these different fun elements that give power through functionality and not power through numbers.
Hard agree.
You're creating it goes back to the reward system, but you're also creating like a fun and deep system for people to grind out like things like you're rewarding the AFK farm still, but you're also not making it so that like there's only one pathway for them to grind out. Like so what if they get to the top like item level, they still don't have the functionality that they need to be like a top tier PvE player.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head there. Is that the one and only end all be all has been light level, and it's really ultimately also not mattered in terms of like player skill too, right?
Yeah.
You I've run through raids with people that are higher level that have struggled with more stuff just because and not saying put any blame. It's just that like I've run more raids. I've run the gamut a little bit more of the stuff. I have a different understanding of the game sense and stuff. So like it's ultimately it doesn't really matter, and that's exactly why I don't have a problem with exploiting a farm. As long as you're not DDoSing somebody, like that's obviously absurdly awful, and they should be punished for doing that. If it's a light level thing, like if you're like, hey, meet me in the forge queue under 700 light level, we're all doing the same thing, and everybody's just like, okay, cool, let's do it. Because it's not possible. You couldn't even encounter a player at that light level, even if it was a new player coming in. They wouldn't be able to complete the activity. So you're all kind of like, hey, we're all wearing low level gear. All right, let's do it. And if you're handing off checkpoints in a dungeon farm, you're doing it with friends. You're doing it with people that you're talking to and you're communicating with. I don't have an issue with that at all.